Hey preteens, you know who I am and you know what this is. So let's jump into our midweek lesson. Before we get started, I do want to mention, in case you haven't heard, we have tentative plans to start back to church on June 7th. I hope that you guys are as excited about that as I am. I absolutely cannot wait to see you guys in person. But please stay tuned to our church's website or Facebook page for ongoing information. Also, I want to mention that it is not too late to get in on our food pantry challenge. It's really easy. You have to get some items to donate to the food pantry at the church. Take a picture of yourself, submit it to me, and turn in those items. Then your name will be entered into a drawing for a prize. It's not going to be just a bag of candy. It's going to be something good. So I promise you do not want to miss out on that opportunity. So get after it, preteens. Okay, so this week we're going to be reading from the book of Ezekiel, and we're going to be in chapter 37. If you'll remember from last week, God's people had not done what was good in his sight. Despite many, many warnings from many, many prophets, they continued to do what was wrong. And so God sent the Babylonians to take over the kingdom of Judah, and all of the Israelites were taken back to Babylon to live as slaves. Now, they knew that this was coming. They had been warned, but they didn't change anything. And so they get to Babylon, and what do the Israelites do? They whine and they moan and they complain, and they say, God, this isn't fair. Why are you letting this happen to us? They just couldn't step back and see that this was a consequence of their sin. God didn't want to have to do this to them. They had a chance to keep it from happening, but they didn't do it. So we're going to learn about a man this week named Ezekiel, who was in Babylon as well, and God came to him and gave him visions. And God showed Ezekiel how he could tell the Israelites that he had a plan, that this wasn't the end for them, that he was going to renew their lives. So turn to Ezekiel chapter 37. We're going to begin reading in verse 1. And it says, "The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, 'Son of man, can these bones live?' I said, 'Sovereign Lord, you alone know.' Then he said to me, 'Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord.'" So God wanted Ezekiel to let the people know that he had a plan, that the consequence of their sins, while it was not fun, that he was going to take care of that for them. Now, when Kennedy was probably 5 years old, I was in the kitchen cooking, and she was in there with me, and I took a pot off of the stove, and I looked Kennedy in the eyes, and I said, "Kennedy, this stove is hot, so don't touch it." And I turned to finish what I was doing, and when I turned back around, Kennedy and her little 5-year-old hand were going straight for the stove, and she laid it directly on the hot coil that I had just told her not to touch. Of course, after that, a lot of tears ensued. She was crying. Her hand was blistered. It was immediately red. I did look at her and say, "Kennedy, I told you not to touch the stove because it was hot." But because I'm her mother and I love her, I also rinsed it off. I put medicine on it, and I wrapped it in a bandage. And within a few days, it was good as new again. That's what God is showing his people here. There are consequences to their sins. One of those is becoming slaves in Babylon. He didn't want to have to do it, but he had to. They didn't leave him any other choice. But he wanted them to know this is not the end of the story. I'm going to send something that is going to take all of your sins and wash them away. And that's his son, Jesus. So just like the bandage that I wrapped around Kennedy's hand to make it good and new, Jesus is that bandage that God sent for his people. And it's not just the people of Israel. It is for every single one of us. We all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God. That's not the end of our story. God is reaching out to us, and he wants us to know that we can have salvation through his son who bled and died on the cross for me and for you and for everyone we know. Don't let sin and the consequence of that sin be the end of your story. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.